Karla, I am so excited to have this conversation with you because I have done kids nutrition on the podcast before, but I've not talked specifically about vegan kids nutrition. And I think there are so many important things we need to address, and particularly when people want to raise their vegan children outside of a vegan space and having dietitians or physicians or family members put their 2 cents in. So I'm really excited we have an expert like you to talk about this.
Well, thanks, Desiree. I'm really happy to be invited and to be able to speak about this topic because as a vegan parent myself, it's very challenging. There are a lot of opinions and pushback, and so it can feel like you're navigating this journey alone. And for other vegan parents, it just feels very overwhelming to kind of go against culture.
Yeah. And I feel like we should just dive straight into it with one of the big, we'll get into all of the details next, but the big question, which is really, is nutrition for vegan kids that wildly different than nutrition for non-vegan kids?
Great question. And I would say yes and no. Childhood is a very sensitive period of development. During this time, children are rapidly growing, making their nutritional needs particularly important. So, regardless of a child's dietary pattern, so whether they eat an omnivore diet, a vegetarian diet, or a vegan diet, their overall nutrition requires special attention. And this is done through a well balanced diet, a supplemented diet to kind of meet any nutritional gaps, and having positive feeding practices at home. There's a myth that omnivorous kids don't need supplements because their diet offers everything that they need. And while that may be true for many children eating an omnivore diet, there are still nutritional gaps, just like a vegetarian and a vegan diet. So, supplementing for those kids is still beneficial. The major difference for kids following a vegan diet is really to ensure that key nutrients are met in their diet from iron and zinc, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and iodine, just to name a few. And so planning meals for vegan kids does require a bit of knowledge from parents and caregivers, but it's fairly easy to do so. And we know that as long as vegan children have a well balanced diet, a supplemented diet, and have positive feeding practices, they grow normally as that of their peers.
Yeah, thank you for that. I find it so interesting because oftentimes when we talk about a vegan diet, we will say a well balanced vegan diet, but the same is true for omnivorous children too. Their diet also needs to be, it's not magic. Both vegan kids and non vegan kids eat apples and oats and, bread. We need to
Right.
make sure that we're getting, all of those nutritious foods on the plate, whether or not the kids are vegan. And I wanted to touch on something because you said that you are a mom of vegan kids. So, when you were deciding on how to feed your children, is your partner also vegan? How long were you vegan? What's your vegan origin story here?
A great question. And I'm happy to share, you know, starting from the beginning about my vegan story. I grew up in a Mexican household where meat, dairy, cheese, and eggs were regularly part of our meals. And it wasn't until in college I was walking to the library and there were a group of kids or a group of students outside of the library passing out a pamphlet. So I took the pamphlet just to be or just for courtesy and I put it in my backpack and I just forgot about it. And it wasn't until I got to my apartment that I looked at it and it had very graphic images of farm factory animals. And as I looked at it and as I read about farm factory, I realized that one, it didn't sit well with me. And two was looking back at how I was raised with treat others the same way that you want to be treated. And I question, well, why can't I do the same for animals? Why can't I extend that same empathy and compassion to them? And so that was 2008. And that's when I transitioned to a vegan lifestyle. And it wasn't, overnight. It definitely took time and it was very gradual, where I started eliminating certain products out of my diet until I fully became vegan. And then when my husband and I met, at the time, he was not vegan, but he was very supportive. And so we actually went on a date to Farm Sanctuary in California. And from that point on, he chose by himself to become vegan. And that made our relationship a lot more exciting because we had similar values. I was following a vegan diet for ethical reasons, and he was doing or following a vegan diet for environmental reasons.
Mm.
And so when it came for us to decide to grow a family, I was really encouraging him to share the same idea and vision with me in raising our family vegan. And so he was, to this day, he's very supportive. And so it's very nice to be able to follow that lifestyle in raising our girls. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old girl, and both of them have been vegan since conception. And it has made raising our daughters fairly easy in terms of the dietary pattern because my husband follows the same diet. I know that isn't true for many families. There are mixed households and it can be a little bit more challenging.
I'm in a mixed household, so I'm the only vegan in my house. But again, I also have an incredible partner who is supportive and completely happy to eat all the vegan dinners I put on the table because I get a
Mhm.
lot of questions about that. People are like, well, do you cook meat for your family? I'm like, no, I don't cook meat for my family. Like, yes, we have animal products in the house, but no, like, I am teaching my kids that even if they choose to be omnivorous, that eating vegan meals is a healthy and normal part of that choice for them. So yeah, it's so much fun to talk to someone who has like a completely vegan house. I'm like, oh wow, like that would be so fun.
Yeah, like I said, it does make it a little bit easier. I don't know what it would be if my husband wouldn't be vegan or if he wouldn't support it, but I'm very fortunate that he does.
Yeah. And so then as a dietitian, did you come to like vegan pediatric nutrition because of this transition in raising a family? Like, did you have a completely different focus clinically before?
Great question. My background is really in skilled nursing facilities. So I worked with the elderly and seniors. And while I had some background in childhood nutrition, I didn't really have that confidence. Even as a nutrition expert myself, I didn't have the confidence or the knowledge to know how to feed my daughters to ensure that they grow normally and develop normally and make sure that they had all the nutritional needs. So it was a big learning curve for me where, my daughter, I think she was 5 or 6 months old, and I would spend every night after I put her down to sleep just reading articles and peer reviewed studies and everything I could learn about not only what nutritional needs she needed, but also to learn more about, how to foster healthy eating habits. And so I learned a lot during that time about nutritional requirements for vegan kids specifically, but also about fostering family meals and eating habits. So, just to answer that question, it didn't come naturally to me to know what to feed her or what nutrients were essential to her growth. I definitely had to learn that.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you did because I feel like there's a lot of parents who might not feel that they have a ton of support for this choice. So I would love to start getting into specifics now, because you mentioned right up at the top about how it's really important that we, for all of our kids, but then also specifically for our vegan kids, that we know where these nutrients of concern come from. So
Hmm.
I would love to start with like two of what I feel are the biggies for like kids and growth and development. So calcium and iron. Can we talk a little bit about calcium and iron?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so for vegan children, and vegan teens, I've mentioned earlier that there are several key nutrients to pay attention to, such as calcium, iron, zinc, iodine, vitamin D, and vitamin B12. And I like to always start with focusing on iron because it's one that requires special attention as early as 4 months of age. I know it can be a little mind-boggling to think that that early we have to think about iron. But if you think about it, iron is used to make hemoglobin, which is a protein in our blood that carries oxygen throughout the body. And as children grow, their blood volume increases and requires iron to support that growth. And this is true for infants, children, and teens. The reason we start focusing at 4 months is because, infants have iron stores until 3 or 4 months of age, and then it stops. And breast milk is not really a reliable source of iron. It's very, very, very low in iron and doesn't meet the demand for a growing baby. So, a supplement is sometimes recommended and encouraged to focus on iron rich foods at the time a baby starts solids. The richest sources of iron would be legumes, so things like soy foods, tofu, beans, lentils, and a baby between the ages of 7 to 12 months needs about 11 milligrams of iron, which, conceptually, it can be a lot for their body size.
It's a
And
huge
so,
amount.
yes, it really is. And precisely why we are recommended to give iron fortified infant cereal so that, we can really ensure that babies meet that demand.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned iron fortified cereal specifically, because I feel like, I mean, there's no controversy in the data. There's no controversy amongst health professionals, but there's a lot of controversy online about these
Hmm.
iron fortified cereals. But when you hear 11 milligrams, like this is a tiny little body that, like,
Yes.
and it is an outsized grown up amount of iron. And those
That's
fortified
right.
cereals make it so much easier.
Oh, yes, it definitely does. I mean, it's recommended to use infant fortified cereal even until a toddler's age, about 2 years of age, just to meet that demand. And so, many parents sometimes feel a little bit off putting with iron fortified infant cereal, but it is a very practical food to use in order to meet that iron demand.
Yeah, I love that. And what about calcium then? What's calcium look like?
Yes, calcium is very important. It specifically supports with bone development and supports having strong teeth. And calcium is one that many vegan children can meet their needs from a variety of plant sources. I really like to encourage calcium set tofu and calcium fortified soy milk. Calcium fortified soy milk, 1 cup serving or 8 ounces, can offer anywhere between 300 to 400 milligrams of calcium, depending on the brand. So, for context, 1 cup of cow's milk can offer close to 300 milligrams. So, they're very similar. And I like to encourage calcium fortified soy milk because it's the most comparable, nutritionally comparable to that of cow's milk. So, it offers very similar calories, fat, and protein. And so kids can meet their calcium needs from a variety of sources like calcium fortified soy milk, cooked leafy greens, calcium set tofu. I believe in other countries, some tofus may not be calcium
Mm.
set, so they may not offer calcium, but at least in the US, which is where I'm from, it is. And, there are studies that children, regardless of their dietary pattern, so whether they are omnivorous, vegetarian, or vegan, consume less than 50% of their calcium needs, which is quite impactful, for a growing child, because they have to develop their bones. And so I really like to encourage parents to focus on practical foods that they can incorporate in their meal planning, such as calcium fortified soy milk. It's very easy to include it, even if a child doesn't drink it as a primary beverage. It can still be used in their meal planning. I use it a lot on making, pancakes or waffles or chia pudding or even dips and sauces. And so, if you think about adding that a little bit throughout the day in different components of a child's meals, it can really add up.
I want to talk more about soy specifically in a moment, but I also want to, because you have stressed soy milk, talk a little bit about the other non-dairy milks, just so we can be crystal clear what the guidance on things like oat milk and almond milk and rice milk are.
Yes, I think that's something very important to kind of share more insights about that. Other plant milks, such as almond and flax milk or rice milk, they don't really offer the adequate nutrition for a growing child. They lack things like protein and fat and carbohydrates, which is essential for a growing child. And so we want to make sure that the plant milk that we offer to our kids, especially if it's going to be their primary beverage, has appropriate ratios of fat, calories, carbohydrates, and protein. And the one closest to that of what we're looking for nutritionally is soy milk. And so for kids who are allergic to soy, a pea-based milk, kind of like Ripple, I believe that's the only brand on the market
Mhm.
for pea-based milk, that one would be appropriate too. And so using those would be the most appropriate for growing children.
Yeah. It is so important for parents to hear, because we may all have our favorite plant-based beverage for, whatever reason. We like a light texture or something, whatever. But for kids in this like critical growing phase, like soy milk is
Yes.
absolutely the most nutrient dense, which then begs the question. So we mentioned soy allergy, which of course may happen, and there's an alternative.
Hmm.
What of the parents who are like, soy? Really? Is soy okay to be consuming every day for my children?
Yes, that's a great question. And it comes up often. And I think, we often hear a lot of myths and misconceptions about that soy foods are quote unquote bad, or that it might lead to, feminization for boys, or it may lead to cancer. And there's a lot of data and research on soy. It's soy foods are probably one of the biggest research foods out there right now. And so we have a lot of concrete data that shows that soy foods are actually beneficial for our health. And the earlier we provide soy foods to our kids, the more protective health and nutritional benefits they have. So they have a lower risk of developing cancer later on in life if they have consumed soy foods at an early age. And so the idea that we have to fear soy is not true. We have a lot of data to back that up. And so, if you want to try to offer soy foods from tofu, tempeh, or edamame, those are great choices for growing kids.
Big soy house. Soy milk is my drink of choice. And yeah, we eat soy products every single day. I want to circle back to a couple of the other nutrients of concern, because calcium and iron are so important, and we do
Mhm.
hear a lot about them. But you mentioned two, and we'll talk about the third later, but we mentioned two that I think might not be on people's radar, which are zinc and iodine. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Zinc is, a key nutrient, not only specifically for vegan kids, but it's it's used in our bodies to really support growth, especially during early childhood and, even preconception. So it's been shown that as baby grows, breast milk, if they are exclusively breastfed, breast milk doesn't 100% meet their needs. And so it's a nutrient that we really, really focus on when a baby begins to start solids, and especially around the 7th or 8th month of age. So, an infant between 7 to 12 months of age needs about 3 milligrams of zinc. So, I like to encourage parents to really focus on legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds during this time to really meet zinc needs. And so, even if it's adding a tiny bit of pumpkin seed butter, to a plant yogurt, that can really help a baby, meet their zinc needs. And then the other is iodine. And this one I like to emphasize because it's not often talked about in the plant
Mhm.
based world and is one that naturally lacks in plant foods. And I've worked with many parents who really focus on things like seaweed or kombu to meet iodine needs. And while those are great choices and they do offer iodine, the really the most reliable way to meet iodine needs is through a supplement or iodized salt for kids over the age of 2. And the reason being is because depending on where that seaweed was harvested, or depending on where that it was grown geographically, a child can either get too much or too little iodine. And so that can be concerning because most often these products don't say, how much iodine per serving it contains. And so we're really unsure of how much our child is consuming. So I really like to encourage, if you are exclusively breastfeeding and you're supplementing yourself, then baby will meet their iodine needs. Once they are weaned from breast milk and or formula, a daily supplement until the age of 2 would be ideal. And then utilizing iodized salt for kids over the age of 2. That is something very practical to use. Um, I believe a quarter of teaspoon can offer anywhere between 70 to 75 milligrams of iodine, and to a child they may only need about 90. So it allows iodized salt allows to easily meet their needs.
We are a big, and just me as a dietitian, I am a big iodized salt person, and it flies in the face of internet wellness because everyone's got their cute pink salts and all of these kind of things. But we also live in a world where people are really concerned about thyroid health. And we forget
Mhm.
that iodine was added to salt as a public health measure to protect our thyroid.
That's
Like,
right.
come on, iodized salt is
Yes.
this amazing thing. Like, we needn't fear it.
No, we do. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. And, there's this idea that, pink salt or Himalayan salt or even, sea salt is quote unquote better for us. And those actually don't contain iodine. And, there's a reason why we have iodized salt these days. And I'm so grateful that we do, because not only does it help, our thyroid, but it also helps us meet that important nutrient in a very practical way.
Yeah. So maybe let's transition to supplements because you
Mhm.
mentioned using an iodine supplement under the age of 2 or continuing if you're not using iodized
Mhm.
salt. What are the supplements that we want to be thinking about for our vegan kids?
Yes, there are several supplements that vegan kids should take, and each begin at different stages of their growth. And so, kind of to summarize what those are, that's vitamin B12, vitamin D, iodine, iron for infants, and DHA, which is a type of omega 3. And so I like to encourage and emphasize that when a baby begins to start solids, we need a vitamin B12. Mostly because, just to back up, there's this idea that breast milk can offer everything for our baby. And, breast milk is fantastic and it does offer many, many nutrients for our kids. But as baby begins to eat more solids, then they will consume less breast milk. And so we want to make sure that we have that insurance of having those vitamins met for babies. So at the time they start solids, vitamin B12 would be encouraged. And then iodine at the time they are weaned, either from breast milk and DHA at the time that they are weaned or from breast milk in our formula. And so those are kind of the big ones that are encouraged. And then from there on, continue to follow as long as they continue to follow a vegan diet.
Is there a point in as kids grow that you think that they can go from a DHA supplement onto adequate like ground flax, hemp, or chia, or do you encourage DHA like through 18?
Yeah, great question. So we can meet some DHA from, you know, some seeds like chia seeds, hemp seeds, and flax seeds. But there's some data that shows that the conversion from ALA or alpha linoleic acid that are part of those seeds don't fully convert to DHA or EPA. And DHA is particularly important for brain growth or brain development. And so we want to make sure we just go straight to the source and offer to kids. And so even as an adult, it is prudent that we still continue to take a DHA because, that conversion is low and we want to make sure that we meet those needs. So I personally take a DHA supplement every day. My girls do too. And so I think it's important that, we share that information to others that, let's make sure that we meet our needs even as adults.
Okay, so now on to, I mean, not the big one because all of these nutrients are important, but I think the one that's often very top of mind for folks, protein. No, and we have, so on the pod, we have like multiple protein talks for grown-ups. So you can
Mhm.
go back into the archive and read, like all about protein recommendations for adults and whether or not you can meet those needs with plants. Spoiler alert, you can for adults, but where does it fall for kids? How much protein do we actually need to give them and where or should we be giving it to them? Which foods?
Yeah. There's a myth that vegan kids can't meet sufficient amounts of protein from plant foods. And as you mentioned, protein can be met from a variety of plant foods because all plants provide protein, just in different amounts. And, I've shared a story of a friend of mine who has kids of her own. And, the only food item that she can give to her kids to meet protein is eggs because her kids have a texture aversion to meat, which can be very common in kids. And so she has the idea that eggs are the only thing that has protein because plant foods either don't have protein or she can't meet the protein that her kids need. And we hear this from healthcare professionals too, or other members of society, that plants don't provide sufficient amounts of protein. And that's actually not true. Kids can actually meet their protein needs from plants, and they don't actually need as much protein as we think they do. A toddler between the ages of 1 to 3 years of age, they only need about 13 grams of protein, and kids between the ages of 4 to 8 need about 19 grams of protein. And so, just to give you a little bit of context here, half a cup of pinto beans offers about 8 grams of protein. Half a cup of edamame beans offers about 7 grams. And so, together, that's 15 grams of protein. So, if a child were to have that throughout the day, they can easily meet their protein needs. In fact, I always share this story, which is the Vichy Youth Study from Germany. It's the largest study to date that looked at protein intake of toddlers. And what they found was that on average, toddlers consumed 2 times more protein than the recommended daily intake, regardless of what dietary pattern they followed. So, whether they were omnivorous, vegetarian, or vegan, they consumed more than double their protein intakes for the day. So, it's really fascinating to show that, kids can actually meet their protein needs from plants.
Yeah.
And so, I like to encourage protein rich foods from legumes. Those are going to be the richest sources, but grains, nuts, seeds, and yes, even fruits and vegetables can offer some amounts of protein.
We live in a very protein focused society right now. And like
Yes,
more is the motto. And I always think it's so interesting with protein because we are so focused on it. Unlike something like iron, which little ones need in enormous amounts relative to their body size.
right.
Protein, they need much less than their parents would
Hmm.
expect. And it is so easily met by like a normal distribution of foods.
That's right.
Yeah. So I feel like because we've mentioned legumes multiple times throughout, as amazing sources of iron, awesome sources of protein, perhaps now we can address the idea that all of these incredible foods are also very fibrous and very filling. So, how do we navigate which in grown-ups we love? We say, high volume foods feel full and satisfied without going over our energy needs, but our wee ones have massive energy needs relative to their size, and we don't want them to get too full too fast. Like, how do we navigate fullness for our vegan kids?
That's right. I'm really glad you bring that up because the nutritional needs of kids are very different from adults. And with kids, I rarely focus on making sure there's fiber rich foods in their diet because most plants are high in fiber. And children's stomachs are very small. So when they consume high fiber foods, that's going to take a large amount of volume in their small stomachs, which may result in them not consuming or eating enough of foods to meet their nutritional needs. I've worked with many parents who like to focus on fruits and vegetables as part of their meal planning. And while I love that they do that, fruits and vegetables are great. We're exposing kids, we are meeting certain, minerals and vitamins, but children need an incredible amount of energy needs. And so with fruits and vegetables, they lack in meeting that calorie demand. So, what I like to focus with parents is to focus on high protein, high fat foods that are lower in fiber. And so these can be things like soy foods, for example. Tofu is a great example of that. Peanuts or peanut butter, they are great high protein, high fat foods that are lower in fiber. And there are other nuts like cashews and pecans that can serve as great options too. So definitely highlighting, high protein, high fat, low fiber foods for during early childhood.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because I think for most adults, unless we're marathoners or unless we have super active jobs, like most of us are pretty sedentary and we're not in our growing phase. So we might have inadvertently shifted our dietary
Mhm.
pattern to reflect that. But then once we have kids, we need to sort of do the opposite. It's like, how can I cram more like nut
Right.
nut butter and like all of these high protein high fat foods back into at least their portions, if not the overall family meal, so that they can really be fully supported.
That's right. And, sometimes it can help, to kind of shift that mindset of, okay, I need to work backwards for kids. There's some parents where for them they focus more on like the volume and the vegetables. And so they have more challenging time to kind of work back in adding those high calorie foods to their kids. So it can take a little bit of practice to kind of get to that. But I know every parent can do it.
Yeah. And, you mentioned up at the top sort of not just the nutrient needs, but also the eating environment and, the relationship with food. And
Hmm.
I wanted to talk a little bit about family dinners and like eating together. And someone, for example, because we were just talking about, how grown-ups might have sort of shifted their dietary pattern and they might prefer a certain way of eating, but then they have nutrients and foods that they want to provide to their kids. Like how do you sort of advocate for parents to navigate family dinners and like everybody sitting down to the table and like eating the same, slightly different, slightly modified foods?
Yeah, I really like to encourage family meals, if they're able to, because, it brings a lot of benefits to the family, and providing the same meal or foods to everyone in the family is just as important. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you have different leftovers to use, or you have a child with certain food sensitivities or allergies, or you may just not have enough of certain foods for everyone. But making one meal for everyone in the family serves many benefits. By eating the same thing, you're role modeling to your child how to eat and enjoy that food. And so when a child sees their parent or caregiver eat something that they may not be ready to eat, they're seeing that, their parent or caregiver is eating that food. And so the more they see that, the more they see how you enjoy it, the more likely they will learn to try that food and to like it. And so making it more likely for your child to become familiar to it too. So I really like to encourage families to serve the same meal when they can to everyone in the family. And as far as, having meals together, I know sometimes our busy schedules or lifestyle just doesn't always allow us to do that. I've worked with many families where they come home late, and so they offer their kids a meal, put the child to bed, and then they eat their own meal. And so I get that. Sometimes, our lifestyles allow for only that. But even if eating one meal together, it can be any meal, breakfast, dinner, even one during the weekend, that can be so, so helpful for your kids. There's data showing that it increases a child's self esteem. Children can establish positive eating habits, and, they actually have higher intake of fruits and vegetables. And there's also data showing improved mental health. And so, by making an effort to, even if it's just one meal a week, it can bring an incredible benefits to the family.
Yeah.
And I personally have, family meals with my family every day. Sometimes it can feel a bit stressful, with a 2-year old, but I make that effort because I know it's going to positively impact my girls. And I want to tie back a little bit to serving the same meal. I always serve the same meal. Sometimes my 6-year-old is very adamant, saying, I don't want that. I want something else. Make me something else. And, I'm very calm during that time, because I know that her request for something else isn't necessarily because she doesn't want to eat that thing. It's just because she's tired, or, she's overwhelmed from the day. And so I tell her, this is what's for dinner today. You can choose to eat whatever you want from what's on the table. And so I still give her the choice that she can eat whatever she wants, but from what I offered on the table.
Love that you provided so much nuance there. I am huge on like huge on family dinners. I
Hmm.
just think it's so important. But I have a child who's a teenager now, and his soccer coach is hell bent on like dinner time practices. So it's
Oh,
like,
no.
how can we?
Yeah.
So, the idea that, okay, so maybe breakfast then
Mhm.
is the opportunity. Maybe at breakfast, you can all sit down together, and that's
Right.
still a valid family meal, sharing that experience. But then,
Mhm.
even with, you know, families and kids who like maybe the kids are like, oh, I don't want that. I have some time with with my 9-year-old because I say exactly the same thing. So I'm like, I feel validated. I was like, no, this is what's for dinner, and you are welcome to pick and choose the things that you
Mhm.
like or don't like off that plate. And sometimes she's eating the toast and then the white beans and the corn out of my chili.
Yep.
She's like literally looking for the things that she wants. But again, it reinforces that, this is the meal that we eat together, and we do
That's
have
right.
preferences, but like it's one meal. We come together on this one meal. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy to hear that, we have similar philosophies when it comes to family meals.
Yeah. This is probably the perfect place to transition into our rapid fire questions. So, 5 little softballs, like getting to know you kind of thing. So, first one, totally unfair question, but that's what makes it fun. Tofu or tempeh?
Tofu.
Tofu.
Always tofu.
Yeah, I think we're bigger on tofu. I also like tempeh, but my family is definitely bigger on tofu. So, it
Same.
gets more of a
Mhm.
starring role here.
Mhm.
Okay, the most surprising thing you learned in the course of learning to feed your kids?
Oh, man. Wow. Where do I start?
Yeah. Do you have an hour?
Um, yeah, right? I think it's just being able to be a role model when it comes to dining and eating, or how to use a utensil, how to, you know, eat certain things. I think role modeling is something that I've learned throughout the course of feeding my girls, and something that I really value, encourage for other families, and I know is impactful for my own girls. So role modeling will have to be the answer.
Amazing. Okay. Because it is the fall, pumpkin spice or apple cinnamon?
Apple cinnamon.
Me
Yeah.
too. I even have the like cinnamon apple hand soap right now. Like it's just that
Oh,
scent to
wow.
me is
Uh-huh.
just comfort
Oh, yeah,
entirely.
totally.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Your next dream travel destination, money no object, like lottery situation.
Oh, Italy. I've been wanting to go to Italy for a while, and yeah, I'm hoping it comes true sometime.
Yeah. Okay, last one. The one thing you wish everyone knew about going vegan.
I would say that it's not that difficult to go vegan. It can be fairly easy, that as long as you have the support, proper knowledge about meal planning, it can be fairly easy to go vegan and stay vegan.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. It's, food is food, right? And particularly, like if it was 1991, it might be a little bit different. But now, I
Right.
mean, we can eat everything that an
Oh,
omnivore
yes.
does, right? Like a burger, a hot dog, an Alfredo sauce, a stir fry, like everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there are many products out there, alternatives to that of animal-based foods, and there are so many incredible and amazing recipes out there that you can modify to make things vegan. So I like that
Yeah.
added note.
Yeah. There's so much creativity, and it's so
Mhm.
fun to explore new textures and flavors. And yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
it is.
It is fun. I would add that as my second.
Yeah. It's a very delicious time to be vegan.
Yes.
Karla, thank you so much for your wisdom here, and also just all of the valuable knowledge that you share, because I hope that people listening to this who, they're thinking about having kids and what dietary choices they're going to make, or they're already in it and, that little doubt is creeping up, and just that like, oh no, we got it. We got the calcium. We got that. Like we're sorted. We're good. So I hope that this can bring a lot of comfort to folks.
I hope so too. And, it was a pleasure to be invited and speak about this topic. It's something that it's very close to my heart, and I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.